that we'll be talking about reputation, authenticity, and credibility in social networks.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, you got that?
Got it.
Okay, cool. So I should introduce my ad hoc panel of experts that you're lucky to have. Jay Cross here from Internet Time. Jay's waving to himself as he films this.
Wait, I'll get camera 2 going.
Author, blogger, consultant on all things e-learning. And then we have Michelle Lentz, also at Right Technology on Twitter.
Okay, Jay, no.
Does the deep dive on Twitter specifically. Also expert on mobile technologies. And then down at the end we have the competing video filmers, right? Aaron Silvers at Mr. Chompers on Twitter. So in a way, that's what we're talking about: is how can you manage your reputation economy in these environments? What's important to know? What's important to be? And so we'll ask questions and talk about what you guys think about. But when I get asked about Mark, the question is normally, you're in a lot of these networks, and aren't you worried about, what if someone steals your password and starts talking about you, or posting as you or something like that? And my reaction to that is, the more I participate in them, the harder it's going to be for someone to do that. Because the more my people get to know me through Twitter and through Facebook and through my blog and everything else, the more unlikely it is that someone steals my kind of reputation and tries to say something on my behalf that I wouldn't typically say. Because that means the more people who know me, the more people are going to react and say, that doesn't sound like Mark at all. But one of the other pieces in terms of credibility, how do you establish credibility in this? We all have subject matter experts. And how do we use to establish credibility, right? Credentials. Where'd you go to school? What's your degree? You know what? Network doesn't care. Doesn't care a bit. You remember the story about Gates and Allen? Bill Gates and Paul Allen? When they were, what was their first job? They debugged code for digital. Right? They pulled the code, they posted it to a bulletin board, they pull the code and debug it and send it back. And when digital was like, wow, who are these guys doing this great job debugging the code? Turns out they're a couple 15-year-olds. Network doesn't care who you are. Network doesn't care where you went to school. So this is good, and it's horribly frightening to some of our subject matter experts, isn't it? I mean, that all of a sudden these traditional ideas of how we maintain our credibility within organizations are under attack. I talk about how social media attacks hierarchies of expertise, that the way you've become an expert now might not be the way you stay an expert. And the people who you don't think of as experts might be shown to really be the voice of authority within the organization. So those are some of the issues. What do you guys think about, how do you like Michelle, how did you establish any kind of, you're also a wine critic?
Yeah.
Right? But how do you think you went about establishing credibility in this area, right?
I blogged about it a lot. What I've learned is with online reputation, you can manage your online reputation just by sheer quantity a lot. So I blog a lot, I tweet a lot, I'm out there, I'm expressing my opinion, openly saying, hey, I'm not a sommelier, I'm just somebody who loves wine, but the more I talked about it, the more I learned about it. The more I learned about it, the more I talked about it. It was this little circle. That led to things like newspapers starting to source my content and my blog. Am I actually writing for print magazines? It's kind of funny that I get excited that I'm in print. So it was really just constantly having a voice out there that led to me being established as an expert in any of the fields that I work in.
How'd you get to be an expert? What's your path?
Well, began working on my exit strategy to get out of teaching. I found the first web job that would hire me, which was building websites and web games for kids. And I ended up doing it for the NFL. And I did that for a year, and it was awesome. It was a great job, fun. Then my wife got laid off, and I needed to make more money than that. So I ended up getting hired by an e-learning company as a startup in Chicago because I had taught myself Flash. I had a background in education, and I was naturally pretty good with the programming aspect, and Flash was a very new medium in 2001, right? I mean, it was Flash 5 had just come out. They actually had a final programming language, and I just taught it to myself. And I did that for a couple of years, and that was great, until I got laid off again. What I ended up doing was I wrote an article on how to build asteroids in Flash. And that got me into ADL, because having that I built the credibility of saying I can write narratively about something that's very difficult technically. And I could do it using the tools itself to teach you, about, simple aspects of programming. What are functions? What are functions or methods? How do you write an if-then statement? How does that work? And I would take the project into little tiny pieces and I broke it down. It ended up being like about a 100-page tutorial on how to do programming in Flash that anybody could follow to build the Asteroids video game. Okay, not knowing how to draw it, don't have to do any of that. Working in SCORM for a couple of years gave you credibility in something that's very, very difficult, very technically hard, that almost nobody knows about, but lots of people have problems with, right? And I could ride that wave until I retire, pretty much, because how many of you still have LMSs that don't seem to work with your content? Raise your hands. Right. Well, I see a lot of head nodding if there's not head raising. So I'll take that as a yes. But it occurs to me that with all the upkeep that it takes to do that, it's not built to last, right? So I got to be doing something else. Well, all this time I was doing it, I was blogging about it. I was blogging about Flash and SCORM since 2005, right? So you're starting to see it's a winding trail, but the trail leads back to, for me, Mark, that I just kept doing things that ended up falling into place for the next thing.
Right, but to Andy McAfee's point, while all of us were doing this, we were narrating our work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That the more open we were about what we were doing, the more open we were about what we were going through, the more our credibility gained in the market space. This is totally at odds with how we've built credibility in the past, which is you only share successes, you never share failures, you share infrequently at best, right? A scarcity of knowledge, it makes it more valuable, right? So the path that we all took involved self-teaching on some level, right? Mm-hmm. But what it really involved was we all narrated our work. And so I think that's important to think about when we're talking about what kind of dynamics do we want to engender inside our organizations to teach people how to become credible inside these networks, right? So one of the other pieces that I love to look at is how do you, though, you need to rapidly determine the credibility or the authenticity, well, authenticity in a second, but the credibility, reliability of someone in a situation maybe you don't know. Maybe I have been reading Aaron for years. Something like Amazon, where you not only can rate and review books, but you can rate and review reviewers. Right? So if we look at this is one review by somebody on Andy's new book. And what you can see, though, is John Tudor is verified as that's his real name. So that gives me some authenticity. But he doesn't have the other tag about it's one of their top 100 reviewers. So I know a couple things about him right off the bat. Right? So maybe what we start to think about is how can we implement a system like that? If we're going to implement a system that's going to ask for credibility and reliability within our systems on a user-generated level, maybe we need to think about what systems we can implement to kind of catch those pieces of kind of like a person-to-person version of Google PageRank. We need to develop rank on people in blog. And then there's the Bill Marriott story where he's, for some reason, got convinced that Bill Marriott needed to be blogging, and it wasn't really him writing it. And the blogosphere kind of tore him to pieces. So one of the things that social media demands is authenticity. Right? That if you're going to say whatever you're going to say, the worst thing you can try to do is dissemble about it, is to try to be a PR hack or try to not be honest with the group. Now this can be a frightening dynamic inside our organizations, right? That it means that you're going to be honest about what you're going to say, and I'm going to be honest what I'm going to say back. And we're going to understand that it's not an attack, but it's what the experience demands. That this is a conversation, and I'm going to be authentic in it, right? And so when we go into this, one of the things that we might need to really talk to our learners about or talk to our leadership about is do we have the courage, do we have the understanding that we're going to have to be authentic in this environment? That we're not going to be able to fake our way through that. Am I tracking?
No, you're totally tracking.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen more people get in trouble for trying to be, I don't know, PR-ish about something than I have seen them get in trouble about just being open and honest about it.